Welcome, everybody. We're sketching Caribbean endemic birds today, and this is a co-production with me, myself, and I, and BirdsCaribbean and our executive director, Lisa Sorenson. Wonderful. So Lisa's going to get us started off with a few introductory remarks, and then we'll get right into talking about our plan for the day, learning about endemic hummingbirds, and sketching them too.
Okay, so yes, hi everybody. We're so delighted to have you join us today for the second webinar of our Caribbean Endemic Bird Festival. Go ahead and next slide. So just by way of introduction and a little background, the Caribbean Endemic Bird Festival is celebrated every year in spring for 1 month. Now, normally we have a whole army of volunteer educators and partners that are out in the field and in schools and communities doing all kinds of fun and interesting bird education events. Well, as you know, because of the pandemic and this lockdown that we're all stuck in, we're celebrating virtually at home, or as we like to say, from the nest, from our nests. So every day we are posting a new endemic bird of the day on our website, and we have available for free download on our website. We have coloring pages, we have online bird puzzles, ebooks, word games, and all kinds of other activities that you can do online. And they are perfect for kids and families that are stuck at home right now and want to learn about and enjoy Caribbean nature from home. So we invite all of you.
A link in the chat box. And
yes,
we'll do that.
I will do that in just a minute. So normally, so check our website every day. We'll put the link in the chat box. Allie, if you can help do that for us, that would be awesome. We have Allie DeGraff, who's another BirdsCaribbean staff person helping out. And so, be sure to follow us. If you're on social media, if you're on Instagram, look us up on BirdsCaribbean, look us up BirdsCaribbean, look us up on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We are doing awesome little stories every day on Instagram and Facebook, which only last for 24 hours. They're really interactive and fun. And plus, we're doing daily posts. And next slide. Jamaicans living in Missouri. That's so cool. Okay. And so, and in case you're not familiar with us, I just wanted to say a few words about BirdsCaribbean. We are a regional nonprofit organization dedicated to the conservation of birds, Caribbean birds and their habitats. And we work together with people and partners throughout the islands to raise awareness and promote science and build a region where people appreciate and conserve and benefit from our thriving bird populations and ecosystems. Next slide. A lot of our work is focused on outreach and education. As I mentioned before, the Caribbean Endemic Bird Festival is celebrated every spring from Earth Day to International Biodiversity Day. And the goal of this festival is to increase awareness and appreciation of the region's unique birds. We actually have 171 species of birds in the Caribbean islands that exist nowhere else in the world, which is really amazing. Some are single island endemics, some occur in a few islands, and then some of the bigger islands have, 16, 20, 28, 32 endemics just in those islands. So it's a fantastic place to go birding. So as I said, normally we have coordinators and volunteers that are organizing all kinds of cool festival events like birding walks and school presentations, tree plantings, games and art competitions, cleanups, and so much more. And our theme this year is birds and culture. So we're really going to be focusing this month on some aspects of how birds and culture are related. There's a lot of bird folklore and myths and legends that are part of our past and our present culture. So we'll be featuring those in our blog articles and some of our writings. Okay, next slide. And this is just a quick picture showing you what we would normally be doing at this time of year. We'd be outside enjoying the sun and fresh air and birding and doing festival events in communities, doing tree plantings, cleanups, things like that. Next slide. Anyway, this year we're adapting and we did publish just a couple weeks ago our Endemic Birds of the West Indies coloring book. Christine Elder was our illustrator for this book. It has 50 endemic birds in it to color, plus activity pages and background information on Caribbean birds. So every day during the festival, we are releasing a new coloring page on our website that you can download and color at home. And the coloring book is also available for sale. And we are sending out hundreds of boxes of books to all of our partners throughout the islands. So as soon as things get better and you can start having events again, you'll be able to give these out for free to all of your members and people in your communities. So we're excited about that. So today we are very, very happy and excited to have Christine with us to give us a quick overview of Caribbean hummingbirds, some of the species that we have and their natural history. And then she is going to show us how to draw two of the species. So I love art, but I don't know how to draw very well. So I'm really excited to be participating in this webinar. And we hope you guys will all join in and try your hand at drawing some birds. And when this webinar is done, please share with us online. We are using the hashtag CEBF from the nest. And again, we'll share our website in the chat window so you can follow us. So thank you, Christine, and take it away.
Okay, great. Well, Lisa, if you want to stay in there and answer any questions we might have along the way.
Absolutely, yeah. Post your questions in the chat.
Turn down your mic. Yeah.
Let me see if I know how to do that. If not, you can mute me, maybe.
Because because there's a buzzing, a little tiny bit of a buzzing noise.
Okay, can you mute me because I'm not seeing where to do that?
On your end, your own, let's see. Why isn't I'm not, I don't know why
or you can just turn my video off if you can do that, and I can stay in the chat window and answer questions.
Oh, well, yes. Now it's not doing, let me see.
Oh, wait a minute.
Just a sec. Let me see. Oh, wait, now. Oh, there we go. Toggle mic. Okay, great. Oh, good. Okay, that went off. Okay, so I'll have to, you can either type an answer in the chat box, or if I can remember to toggle the mic back on, then you can chat. Okay, great. So then now I will make this larger here, and good, great. Okay, wonderful. So again, I just wanted to welcome you all. I see people from all over the world, and we especially want to see all the Caribbean islands represented. So if you're just getting on here new, if you missed the beginning, we'd love to know where you're from. And yes, so that would be great. Okay, so all about today's workshop. So we're going to go for about an hour, and we're going to start out talking a bit about Caribbean endemic hummingbirds, and then we're going to do a sketching session. And don't be afraid if you don't have a pencil or paper, or if you weren't able to download the resources, that's okay. Sometimes it's great to just watch first time through and then watch the replay later and follow along. So you can watch the replay, any of this later on, and you can even watch it at a slower speed if the sketching is too fast for you. I also wanted to point out that you obviously know that there's a chat box over here. And so you can put some questions in there that Lisa could be monitoring, and she could answer in the chat. Now, let's try to just keep the chat box to questions and answers. So if I ask you something, then we will, you can type that in there as well. And we're really trying to not fill the chat box up with anything else besides questions and answers and where you're from. But we're going to move on pretty soon. Now, you can minimize the chat box as well, and you'll want to do that as soon as we start the slides, especially the beautiful slides that we have that BirdsCaribbean gave us to use for this slideshow, and then also for the step-by-step. I believe, yes, so we talked about the chat box. Then down below, there's also a button called Click Here for Resources. And that's where you would go to visit my website and get some more of the downloadable resources, these little images that I'm going to use today. But again, don't worry about it. If you don't have that, just watch along. Okay, and we're going to go probably for about an hour, but I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer. I do need to leave at noon my time, but I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer. and we'll just see how we go. Okay, and let's see. I think I told you everything. I just wanted to really thank Lisa again for inviting me, and it's just wonderful to be here. And let me get just started here. Let me push the right button here. Great. Yeah. So I just love the Caribbean. I've traveled there a lot. Now, this image here was from Costa Rica, but I do love to visit all the Caribbean islands as much as I can. And I've bird watched there and I've sketched there. And these are just kind of some examples of what I do in the field. So my background is I'm a naturalist and environmental educator and a visual artist. I'm a trained scientific illustrator. And like Lisa said, I illustrated the new coloring book of the Caribbean. Well, it's called Endemic Birds of the West Indies Coloring Book. And so I'm from Oregon, but I love to travel, as I said, and I've been to the tropics, especially the Caribbean and Central America a lot, and I love to sketch in the field. And so even though I'm a trained scientific illustrator, my favorite thing to do is turn people on like you who are just maybe naturalists or bird watchers, and maybe you haven't ever tried to sketch before, and I want you to try to get the confidence and skills to do that in the field. So you can just see from these sketches, these are really light and loose, and I've just done it in pencil and then added a little bit of watercolor wash. And so we're not doing watercolors today, but we're going to do some sketchy, quick outlines, kind of like these, of a few different species. And so I want us to think about that these are skills I would love to see you try out in the field. We're not trying to create something like field guide illustrations or formal biological illustrations. We're just doing like 10-minute quick sketches using the techniques that I'll show you towards the end that I use to sketch. Okay, so yes, hello from Germany and Florida and all over the place. Yes, great. Okay, so as was just mentioned in the chat, we're talking about how many hummers there are and where they live. So they're in their own family, Trochilidae, and they're closely related to swifts. And they only live in the New World, although they look a lot like birds in like Africa, like sunbirds, but that's just kind of convergent evolution to living a particular lifestyle, similar lifestyle. So the hummingbirds are only in the New World, and you can kind of see by this graph that the closer you get to the equator, the more species there are. So there's over 300 species between Alaska and Chile, and they're pretty diverse genetically, over 100 genera, and they're actually the second largest family behind the flycatcher family. And as you see, the number of species increases as you go towards the equator, with over 150 in the country of Colombia alone. And so you probably can't read all this, but this is just giving you a quick glimpse of how many there are. So like in way up north in Canada, there's only about 8 species. But as you go farther south, there's more and more. And here on the right, you can see how many there are. Now, this is an estimate in each country, although, well, Jamaica only says 5. So I don't know, maybe this is a little outdated. But anyway, moving on. So there are a lot of hummingbirds. I believe there are 20 to be found in the Caribbean. Lisa can correct me in the chat if she wants to. And about 16 of those, I believe, are endemic, meaning they live nowhere else in the world. As Lisa said, some of them are only on one island, like the Jamaican Streamertail, and others are more widely spread out. So of the 20, about 16 are endemic, and then there's a couple that are migrants that just come and go here and there during migration, like right now, like the rufous and the ruby-throated hummingbird, which someone in the chat mentioned that they'd seen. So anyway, here's just a list of all the endemic hummingbirds, and it's with the illustration, the photograph here of the Jamaican mango. And you see they have such interesting names that help to describe what they look like mango or purple-throated or, Antillean crested or streamertail. So they have really creative names. And so we're just going to do a quick outline of just a few of the species, just to give you a taste of the variety. They're very widely wide in terms of taxonomy, a lot of different genera in the Caribbean among these endemics. So they're not all closely related, but some of them are. And so we're just going to give you a little bit of eye candy, a little quick trip through some of the species. And oh, let's see, we have got people saying hi from St. Martin, Jamaica, Virginia. Wonderful. Okay, so this is the purple-throated Carib, and it often looks really black in certain light, but in other light, it's just a beautiful purplish green, and you can see that on the wings here. And these guys are kind of interesting. They're basically just in the Lesser Antilles, and both sexes are really handsomely iridescent, but they do differ slightly in their bill and in their size. The male is slightly larger, which is opposite of many birds where the female is larger. And so we've got the female on the right. And do you notice how they have different shapes of bills? That's definitely something you want to notice when you're sketching. And so here's another image of that same species. And so the male on the left has a little shorter bill, and it's not quite so curved. And the female's is more recurved. Or is it decurved? Downward curved. Anyway, that is an interesting adaptation that this species has to feeding on different types of flowers. So they're not in direct competition with each other. And they like things like banana flowers and also heliconia flowers. And so the male and the female tend to nectar on different heliconias, like the female on the right. She really loves the lobster claw heliconia, which is one that I illustrated in one of my free classes a couple weeks ago. Anyway, moving on. And so this is another one, the Bahama Woodstar, and obviously it's in the Bahamas. It's a pretty common and widespread species on that island. And it has a really deeply forked tail, although we don't see that here. It's got this beautiful, what I would call opera pink gorget. That's a watercolor color, opera pink. Anyway, and here is the female, and you see how different they look compared to the two purple-throated Caribs. And the female, she's got kind of a little white collar that you can sort of see, and you can see her tail is really interestingly patterned, which a lot of females do have an interesting patterned tail, whereas males often have an interesting patterned neck at the gorget area. And she's feeding on some flowers. Of course, hummingbirds are evolved to nectar from flowers. It's actually thought that they first evolved to visit flowers to get little gnats and insects living on them, and later on evolved to collect nectar. And of course, the nectar has a lot of energy for these species that have such a high metabolism. I read that their metabolism is 100 times that of an elephant. So that's why they need to feed frequently all day, every day. And that's one thing that makes them such great pollinators. So they're really good pollinators. And often they do visit these red tubular flowers, which is what you think of often with a hummingbird. But hummingbirds really do visit a much wider variety of flowers than this. And here's the little bee hummingbird. And this one is so cute. This one's only found on the island and nation of Cuba. And it's the world's smallest bird. In fact, I think it's just about the world's smallest vertebrate. It's only about 2 inches long and weighs, I think, less than a penny. Whereas one of the world's largest hummingbird weighs up to 20 pennies, and it lives in South America. So you see this one, how unique this one is in terms of its beautiful gorget. And those feathers, we'll draw this a little bit later, those feathers of the gorget of the male, those beautiful iridescent feathers go way down towards the chest, which is kind of a unique attribute. Aren't those beautiful colors? And you definitely see how the colors change of the head and the neck as the bird turns. So here's another picture. This is the female. You know, so often males get all the attention, but the females are beautiful in their own right. And here she is nectaring on some lantana. So you see how different really this is from the other flower that the Woodstar was nectaring on. So often the females are more pale, more dull, so that they can be camouflaged, especially on the nest when they're sitting on the nest. And here's a cute little guy. He's got a mohawk. This is the Antillean Crested, and this one is from the Lesser Antilles, as its name suggests, and also over towards Puerto Rico. Now you can see both of these images are of the male, and this is his crest that he's named after. And you can see how he can relax it flat, and how blue it is in this light, and then how he can erect those feathers and make them go straight up, and you see how they're a little bit different color here. Aren't they cute? This is just one of my favorites. And here's the little female of the same species. And again, she's a little bit more subtly marked, and she's sitting on her nests. And in hummingbirds, the females do all the work. So they are the ones that build this little tiny nest, and their eggs are barely larger than a BB bullet from a BB gun. And they usually have just several babies, and they're the ones that build the nest, and they're the ones that are foraging for both insects and nectar to feed their babies, and especially eating insects. And they like to nest generally towards near wet areas where there are a lot of insects hatching and living near the water that they can dine on. So that's the little female. Yes, Lisa, that's right. The nests are held together with spider webs and also little pieces of lichen and such. Yes, the nest is very small. And here's just another picture going back to the male of just how handsome and jaunty he is. So then there's the Puerto Rican emerald, and as its name suggests, it's from Puerto Rico exclusively. Again, we're talking about just endemic birds of the Caribbean, if you got here a little bit late. And he is a beautiful emerald color. And here he is nectaring on a different type of plant. And you can notice here his forked tail. So many hummingbird species will have different shapes to their tails. And so this one is highly forked, with the outermost feathers being super long. And here's another view of a different kind of flower. Now this is tubular, but it's not red. So again, hummingbirds don't just go to red tubular flowers. They eat a lot more types of flowers, nectar from a lot of more species than you would think. Okay, and then speaking of long forked tails, this is the streamertail, and it's named after the male's long tail feathers. Those are the outermost two tail feathers. Now, they don't always have that because they do need to molt once in a while, but this is the male in his full glory. And there's two versions of the streamertail, the red-billed and the black-billed, but you can still see on this red-billed, the end is black. And here's another version you can see even better, and we're going to sketch this guy pretty soon. You can see the end is black. So, and this is the female, again, being more camouflaged in her coloration to blend in with the nest. So a lot of birds do have a very gray or black bill, especially if they use that bill for a lot of things like woodpeckers excavating nest cavities. But most of the time, birds have black coloration on their bills and their legs and often the ends of their feathers, because that black is made with melanin, and melanin is a very strengthening ingredient or pigment in the bird's feathers. Yes, Beth says they sort of look like quetzal tail feathers. Yes, great. Okay. And then here's another couple pictures of those streamertails and another type of flower that they visit. And this male is got his tail crossed, so they can really move those tail feathers around and show them off to other males that they're competing with for their territory as well as their name. Yes, the tail. That's right, Lisa. So all the Caribbean birds have really interesting local names. And one of the local names for this is the doctor bird because of those long tail feathers that would remind you of a like an 18th or 19th century doctor who wore the black long coat with the tails on it. Yes. Okay, great. And then this is the black version. Okay. All right. Let me see in the questions. Yes. Great. Hello, Rebecca and Susan and Connor and Jessamy from Mexico. I see a lot of names I recognize. And Lisa noticed all the others. Oh, of course. Yes. Xavier, you're right. This is the national bird of Jamaica. Now, I don't know if Lisa knows or could chime in if any other hummingbirds or endemic birds of the Caribbean are national birds of their island. You know, the Caribbean is made up of many islands, and a lot of those islands are their own nation, and they speak often their own language. And so we speak English and French and Dutch and Spanish. Oh, okay. The imperial parrot is the national bird of Dominica. Great. And I think they covered, you covered the imperial parrot the other day is one of your dailies. Okay, let's get going. We got to stay on time here. So a little bit about hummingbird anatomy, just so you know what to notice when you're sketching. So this isn't really a biology lesson, and I'm not an ornithologist. I'm just a bird watcher and a general naturalist, and of course, a nature sketcher. And so I always talk about form and function that will help you draw something more accurately. Okie dokie. So here, this is actually a rufous hummingbird, which does come through the Caribbean once in a while. And it shows a couple things. Of course, it's got the long bill. It's got a very large eye for its size, this family, the Trochilidae, and a very large head for its size, proportionally out of size. And those large eyes give them really good color vision, especially to see flowers. Now, a lot of temperate hummingbirds have this spot. Let's see, am I pointing to that? Yeah. A lot of temperate hummingbirds have this spot behind their ocular or eye area, and it's called the post-ocular spot. But it just seems that a lot of the tropical ones don't for some reason. And here's moving on to the body, looking at the skeleton. And one thing you notice here, especially, is the extremely long bill. I'm sorry, I don't know what species this came from. But what you do know also is this big sternum, this big keel, and that is like the keel of a boat, and all of these flight muscles attached to that so they can fly. And of course, hummingbirds are unique. The hummingbird family is unique for being able to fly not only upside down and backwards and doing, loop-de-loops in the air, but hovering. They hover at flowers. And so about 30% of their weight are those flight muscles. And so those attach from the sternum and they attach to the wings. And of course, when the first thing you think of about hummingbirds is their colors. And a lot of their colors are iridescent, meaning that those are structural colors that are built right in to the feathers, and they their color relates to what angle they are angled towards the sun. So the males will very much on purpose shine their gorgets or neck feathers towards a male rival or towards a female they're courting. So they definitely know how to turn their feathers, or if they want to be more camouflage, they can turn away from the sun and instantly go almost black. Okay, let's see what else about that color. Yeah, and so a lot of the blues and greens and purples are these structural iridescent colors, whereas other colors like the kind of the reddish that we saw in the rufous, those are more what we call pigmentary colors, and some of those do come from birds' foods. A lot of birds, like in the tropics, that eat a lot of fruit, get a lot of their colors. And there's pigmentary colors from fruits, like thinking of, toucans and things. And of course, the males are generally more colorful than the females in most of our species. Okay, now the wings are helpful, of course, in flying, and they have a really unique structure. The hummingbird has a lot more flexibility in its shoulders, so that when they're flapping their wings, they don't just go up and down, but they go in a sort of a figure eight, and that allows them to have lift with both the when they flap down and up. They don't really flap down and up like most birds. It's kind of more of a figure eight that gives them continuous lift, and that's why they can hover. And another thing about their wings that allows them to be such good flyers and such maneuverable flyers, like flying through the rainforests and dodging and dashing around so quickly, is they have these really long primary feathers. So we're not getting into feather anatomy here, but this little group is the secondaries, and they're super short in hummingbirds, almost non-existent, whereas the primaries make up most of the flight feathers that they use to fly, and they're really long, and there's 10 of them, which is different than songbirds, which usually have 12. Now, their bills, we've seen a few different bills so far, and this Carib, of course, shows a downturned bill, and sometimes bills can be different shapes within a species, like in this purple-throated Carib we mentioned earlier. But among species, they will be different too. So we want to notice how long that bill is, and if it's straight or curved down like this one, or even curved up. I don't believe a Caribbean one has an upturned bill, but a famous one is the sword bill of South America, whose bill turns up. So you want to notice how long that bill is and whether it turns up or down. Now, tails, of course, tails help them to be very acrobatic flyers as well. And they have 10 tail feathers. And you can count those right there. Whereas songbirds that they aren't very closely related to have 12. So want to notice those, and sometimes you can see them. And they are different color patterns as well. So you want to notice that. And then the feet. So this family, the Trochilidae, which includes all the hummingbirds, they're closely related to the swifts. And if you know, swifts have very tiny feet. Their feet are so tiny they can't even perch. They have to just hang from something, like inside of a hollow tree or a chimney, which we have here. And so they're in that same big grouping, the same order, the Apotiformes, which actually means without feet. Now, they do have feet, but they're so tiny that they really can't walk. They only can perch, and they do spend a lot of their time perching. Otherwise, their feet are kind of a lot like other perching birds, with the 3 toes forward and 1 toe going back to grip onto the branch. And their toes are kind of, their legs and toes are kind of naked, so you can see the skin mostly, except in the on the mainland in South America, there's the booted racket tail, which has little fuzzy white boots on his legs. Okay, so now we're moving on to some really quick tips for sketching, and I want to, let me see, there we go. I'm going to share the screen for just a minute. Hi, guys, in case you got in here late. Hi, I'm Christine Elder. So we're going to start sketching in a moment. And don't leave, though, if you don't have pencil or paper. Hold on tight. It's going to be really fun, and you'll learn a lot just by watching. So again, if you weren't here in the beginning, I am a naturalist, environmental educator, and visual artist, and I love teaching people how to take a sketchbook out in the field with them. Now, especially these days where we can't get too far out in the field, especially with other people, this is a wonderful time to start a sketching practice and to do bird watching, which is a pretty solitary, quiet activity anyway. And when you sketch birds, you learn them so much more quickly. So if you're a new bird watcher and you really want to learn the differences between similar species, like a lot of the hummingbirds look similar, and so do a lot of the warblers, especially out of season, the more you can sketch them, even if it's a very simple symbolic sketch with a lot of little notes, that's fine. You are going to learn to identify birds so much more quickly. Okay, so I'm not trying to teach you how to be a Sibley or an Audubon. I'm just trying to teach you how to have a little skill and confidence to take a sketchbook out in the field. Oh, Blake said he did not see a cheat sheet for today. It is linked below where it says click for resources. And I did email people earlier today, which I hope you would have gotten that email, and that had a link to it. But no worries if you don't have the cheat sheets like these. You should just watch and kind of follow along the best you can, because of course, practice makes perfect, although I don't advocate for perfection, but it does improve your skills for sure. So my tips are all about ways to sketch quickly in the field. We're not trying to make a scientific illustration that we're going to spend 10 hours on, which I've definitely done with an illustration before. Okay, so we're going to try to use a really light and loose touch on our paper. And not pushing down at all, almost like as if you're just tickling the paper, just a feather-like touch, especially in the beginning. And you'll see me demonstrate this. And I want you to keep your pencil moving. I want you to pretend you're out in the field, actually watching one of those fast hummingbirds, and you don't have all day. He's going to fly off. So you got to keep that pencil moving, and you want to try to avoid erasing until you've got a correct line. So many people will draw a line and then erase, and draw a line and erase, and they won't get anywhere. And I always advocate for you to think about drawing similarly to how you would think about like writing a paper if you're a student, or brainstorming some ideas if at the office, if you have a business. It's the idea of just getting everything down on paper, whether it's words or sketch lines, and separating the creation phase from the editing phase. Okay, so the creation is the drawing and the editing is the racing. And so next, we really want to glance back and forth really frequently between our subject, which today is going to be a photograph, but it might be a bird at your hummingbird feeder, and to make sure you're glancing at a structure and then down at your paper and you draw it, and back and forth and back and forth. So to make sure we're really doing what's called ground truthing, that's a scientific term, to make sure that what you're seeing in the field is what you're really seeing on paper. And so we want to try to actually draw from direct observation. So pretending like you're somebody like John Muir, or John James Audubon, or Alexander von Humboldt, somebody who's out there in the field with their sketchbook before you had cameras and video, and that you just had to get the sketches down. And make sure to kind of draw what you see and not be drawing from imagination or memory, which is a fun kind of art, but it's not what we're focusing on today. And lastly, to really enjoy the process over the final product. So you'll notice that even if you hate your drawing at the end of today, that you will have learned a lot about hummingbirds just by listening to this presentation and then going through the steps of drawing it, even if you hate your drawing, okay? And of course, to have fun, right? So worrying too much about our sketches, you know, that's a very modern problem, right? We've got a lot bigger problems in the world right now than getting stuck creatively, okay? Okay, so, okay, and then let me make this bigger here. Now, this is what I call my 6-step roadmap to sketching success. And this is something that you can also download from my website. Again, if you didn't hear it before, down below it says click here for resources, and that goes over to my website. And there's these resources like this that you can download. And there's free weekly tips that you can sign up for. I've got a whole year of tips. And I also have a mini course called Stick Figures to Songbirds in 60 minutes. And so that's where this is from. So you can download that later. Anyway, we're going to be using these ideas when we start sketching in just a minute. And so we're going to be talking about the idea, let me get this out of the way, the idea of blocking in our basic shapes. So thinking about that core, thinking about that core shape, that egg-like shape of the body, and the circle for the head, triangles for the wings, that kind of thing. Then I want you to think about proportions. So that means how big is one part to another. So once you draw the head, is the body the same size or twice as big? And is the wing just as long or longer than the body? In fact, that's another thing to notice that I didn't mention before is sometimes the wings are longer than the tail and sometimes they're a lot shorter. Depends on the length of the wing and the length of the tail. Next, alignment. So we want to look at what structures are lined up on our bird. And I'll often be using my pencil. I'll hold it in front of me horizontally and vertically and line things up because our left brain can really get in the way of our right brain. And we think we know what something looks like and we don't. So we really want to do things like alignment. And then flow lines, that's just my idea of how a pencil line flows over your object and thinking about whether that's a smooth line, like a really quiet wave, lapping gently at the beach, or whether it's, kind of a jagged line as if it was water going over boulders over a waterfall up in the mountains. And then angles. I want you to look at the angles of your subject and maybe think about whether that's a 30-degree angle, 45, 90, 120. And then also negative shapes. And so that is the negative shapes or negative spaces that are around our object. And so in this case, it's these white spaces like between the toes and the body and between the forked tail, that kind of thing. Okay, great. Let me see real quick before we're going to start our sketching in just a sec. I'm going to look really quick at the questions. No, the bee hummingbird is not in Mexico. It's only in Cuba. Yes, we're going to draw together in just a moment. Are some hummingbirds birds of paradise? No, completely different family to a completely different continent. Birds of paradise are only on the island of New Guinea and a few of them on northern Australia. Okay, great. All right, so now what we do is, as I reminded you before, that there's a link below where it says click here for resources to get this resource page that has all the species. I did make a film to do these in a minute, but we're not going to get to all of them. But anyway, that's what it looks like if you downloaded it. And if you do have the ability to download and print from a nicer quality printer, that's really great because these are all really high quality photos that these photographers in the Caribbean have loaned to us today to use. Okay. So let's start sketching. We're going to start with a streamertail because, as Lisa mentioned, that's the bird of the day over on the BirdsCaribbean website and the BirdsCaribbean Facebook page. You will see a bird of the day for 30 whole days. And every day you'll get to learn a lot of information about its biology, and you'll be able to download the coloring page about that bird, a coloring page that I was lucky enough to illustrate. And Mark Yokohama, he was the one that wrote the text. So great. Yes. So Lisa has just given that link there, but don't leave now. I'll give you the link again later. Now, of course, this isn't written in stone. This is just my way of sketching. There's no perfect way to approach a sketch. And other artists in the Caribbean, like Nils Navarro, who illustrated the Cuban book, what an excellent bird illustrator he is. I'm sure he has a different process. So don't feel bad if this process doesn't work for you or if you don't like it, but just try it. Okay, so who's ready? Say me. I see a lot of names I recognize, like Lily and Jacob and Regina and Blake and Nancy. Who's ready to go? Debbie. So if you can, have your pencil and paper ready. And it's okay if you don't have this cheat sheet. Good, I see a lot of me. It's wonderful. Let's get going. Okay, so we have looked at this species a little bit already, but what I always do first is I'm just kind of air drawing around the bird to kind of make myself look at the various parts. And then I will start measuring. So I'm going to measure the length of the head here, and just going to place that on the paper first. And you're going to notice I do a lot of this measuring, and I'm going to start out really lightly. Okay, so I'm just making a mark that shows how long that bill and that head is. And you see I'm using my pencil. I do that a lot. And so that's just a line that represents the bill and kind of going through the middle of the head, because the eye will be sitting on that line as well. And then I'm drawing a kind of a teardrop shape. And that's just a start. So be very light. I want you to be lighter than I am if you can. This is just darker so that you can see it. But I want you to try to not push down at all on your pencil and draw as light as you possibly can. So I'm just kind of drawing this. I drew this sort of oval area for the head. And we're going to get back to all of these parts again. This is just a very first start. And because like I said, oh, wait a minute. Like I said, when I'm sketching, I like to pretend this is a real bird. And in case I don't have more than, a minute or two, that I'll get a little bit everywhere, and then I can fill that in later. And by looking maybe at a photograph I took, or looking at the bird again later at a different habitat. So don't worry, we're going to go darker and more particularly stronger, more confident lines in a minute. So now I'm doing the back. You can see his back is sort of hunched. And yeah, he's hunched over this stick. And then I'm measuring this whole body, not including the tail, just kind of the body. And that body is always sort of a oval, kind of like an egg shape. And I'm measuring the width, getting his neck, and then just getting the body. We're going to add the wings and tail later. I always try to get the core part of an animal first before I start doing any of the extremities. And so you see I'm double checking. I do a lot of that so I can just really be sure of my measurements. So I'm just again looking, making sure. Now I'm going to add that tail, those short tail feathers. There's, I believe, 8 of those short tail feathers. We won't see all of those, but I'm just double checking where they end there. And of course, he's got the 2 longer tail feathers, but we're just doing those little overlapping feathers right now. So you see, I'm just kind of doing some loose oval shapes. I don't know what you would call that, where I'm just indicating kind of how those tail feathers are sort of overlapping each other. And again, double checking. So you can never do that too much. Now I was just double checking from the forehead to the end of those shorter mane tail feathers. Now I'm indicating the wings, and you don't really see those wings very much. They're kind of very relaxed, and they're tucked under and behind the tail. So they're just going to be really subtle. So I'm just drawing a little arced, and like an arced line that kind of represents those. I'll clean that up a little bit later. And again, I'm just going light and loose everywhere. And you notice I haven't done any erasing yet. So really try not to do erasing. Let's just do the creating phase before we do any editing, staying light and loose. So now I'm noticing, again, that idea of alignment. So I'm noticing how far forward those tail feathers go. I notice, see what I'm doing? I'm not drawing a line. I'm just visually lining up that those tail feathers are kind of bent towards the front of the bird, and they're actually to the left of the male's bill. But it doesn't have to be exact, and that's one thing I like to teach people, is that the more you know about the structure of a type of organism you're going to draw, the more you know how important or how unimportant certain structures are to get exact. So like for a hummingbird, it's pretty important to get the length of their bill and whether it's straight or curved. That's a really important characteristic of that species. And of course, having the long streamer tails of this hummingbird is important. But as you saw from the photograph, it's so easy for him to move those feathers all over the place and display that it doesn't quite matter where you put them, as long as you relatively have the right length, because you see they are nearly twice as long as the whole body of the bird. And you'll see that one edge is straighter and one edge is a little bit wavy, especially down towards the bottom. But I'm just first going to get that outline of his left long streamer tail very lightly. And then I'm going to get the right one. And I was noticing exactly where it's coming out. See, I'm noticing there where it's coming out of the the shorter tail feathers, and where it is in relationship to the first one I drew. And that's an idea, that's that idea of negative shapes. So we see right there, we see this negative shape between, that's this gray sky. So think about drawing that as much as you're thinking about drawing the actual streamer tails. Yeah, and it's just staying light and loose. You see, I can go quickly because I'm not pushing down. So now finally I have an outline of the whole bird. This is the first time we're doing any erasing. So I'm just lightening some lines, cleaning some things up, and just lightening it up. All my sort of try lines. And we're just going to get them more correct now. So now I'm going to go back now that my bird, I've decided, I'm pretending that the bird came back to the same perch, or maybe it's a different individual, but it's still an adult male, and that he's sitting in the same position as the last one. And now I can work on him a little bit more. So I'm going to start putting a little bit more emphasis on the head. And now you see, I'm going to start going a little more slowly, and I'm using my left finger to kind of point at what I'm drawing, just to keep me honest there and make sure that I'm really looking at what I'm drawing. And I made sure that the bill was the right length and shape. And then now he's got a little bit of a crest, kind of that like that Antillean crested hummingbird, but not quite as much. But he can lift that up when he wants. Now I'm going to go down that hunched back, and you see it's a big hunch, and he's got a little skinny neck kind of, and then a big hunch, and then it goes down, the body ends, and now the tail begins. So those were the upper tail coverts I just drew, and now we're going to draw some of those 8 tail feathers. I'm not sure if I drew all of them. They could be overlapping, but I drew a few. And again, I'm keeping my left finger kind of pointed to keep track, making sure. It's really easy to get confused when there's a repetition of something, like lots of feathers. So I like to kind of count. And I was just fixing that a little bit just for fun, because I'm particular. I was noticing how those feathers are overlapping. And so you see, I'm drawing darker than before. So each time I go over the bird, I'm drawing darker because I'm more confident of my lines. Okay, so now I'm going to start at the neck and come down to his chest. And then we'll get the wing very lightly. And just that wing, remember, it's under those long streamer tails. So that's why I skipped a line right there. See, right there, I didn't draw that fully. I skipped because that left streamer tail is in front of his wing. His wings are relaxed and under his tail. Okay, so now we're going to go back to this streamer. And again, we're going to go more slowly and really look and push a little harder. And we're noticing that leading edge is straight, but the back end is wavy on both of those streamer tails. And you don't have to be exact again. And I'm a little too narrow there, but I'm just doing a little wavy, a little suggestion of a waviness at the bottom of that tail. Okay, so now we're doing his right streamer, and we're noticing where it's coming out right from below his shorter tail feathers. And with that one, the left side is wavy. And the right side of that tail is straight. Now, again, just cleaning up a little bit. And so again, going back one more time to clean up everything. We're going to add that eye. Remember, they have a pretty big eye, but you can barely see it in this color pattern. A lot of animals like to camouflage where their eye is because it keeps them safe from predators. Now I'm just adding some of those neck feathers that look kind of blackish. And then I'm just lightly suggesting the edges of the secondaries and the primaries. These are the secondaries right there. So you saw those were just a bunch of little, what would you call that? Maybe like a C or an L shape. Now, it takes a lot of study to really learn how feathers lay on the body exactly, and how long they are and how they overlap. So we obviously don't have time to talk about that today, but I do have more info on my website about that. So we're just lightly suggesting it. Anyway, partly because hummingbirds are always moving so fast, so we can pretend they're a little bit blurry anyway. And these wings are in shadow too. So I'm just drawing a few lines. I'm not being exact because a lot of these feathers are overlapping anyway, and they're very translucent. So you're not necessarily going to see all 10 of those primary feathers like I mentioned. So don't be too particular about that. So now we got the outline, and I'm just really quickly adding just these little scalloped areas of the feathers. Now, again, we could spend all day drawing all these scalloped feathers. And next, I'll show you one more bird, the bee hummingbird, and we'll do a little bit better job on its feathers. And then I'm just cleaning that up a little bit. Okay, so that's about it for that one. Anybody done with that Streamertail? Lisa says me. Wonderful. Awesome. Okay, great. Well, let's move on. I know this is quick, but you can watch the replay, and I don't want to go too over. And I do want to have a chance to draw this really beautiful bee hummingbird because it's got such a beautiful gorget, and we'll spend a little bit more time on those feathers of his neck and his head and making those a little bit more realistic than we did with the other one. So make sure to come back and watch the replay if you want of that other one. Yeah, so it does take some time, Blake. Don't worry. Practice makes perfect. Okay, so here's our bee hummingbird, the native to Cuba. Kind of doing the same idea where we're just going to air draw. So we're just looking at all those parts first, and we did look at him earlier, and we noticed some unique things about him, like he does have a post-ocular spot, like the rufous hummingbird, and he does have the longest gorget with those feathers coming all the way down below his wings, way down there on his chest. And his bill is kind of straight and kind of medium length. Okay, so then now that we looked at it a bit, we're just going to start sort of the same way as we did before. So maybe this one will be easier. So we're going to draw a line that represents the whole length of his head, including his bill and his brain case. And I want you to stay lighter than I am. Remember, I'm drawing so that you can see this, but I want you to be as light as you can, to have just a feather light touch where you're not pressing down on the pencil at all, where your lines are just barely visible for you. So now I'm measuring how long the bill is compared to the head. And then I'm going to draw a little teardrop for the head shape. Oh, Blake. Yeah, we forgot the feet on the first one. Oh, well, you can put those in later. Those were pretty well hidden. They didn't show up too much. And we'll add the feet on this one, okay? So just like before, staying light and loose and just kind of showing where it is. The eye is always kind of in line with the head, the bill, and it's pretty large. And that bill's downturned just a little bit. Remember, we're not doing any erasing. So even though I have some lines here I don't want later, we're just going to continue moving. We're pretending that this is a living bird. He's now going to get his little throat. He's got a kind of a fat throat there. And I'm measuring the width of his neck there, the back of his head and his throat, just kind of that whole head area. Then we're going to move on to his belly. Remember, staying light and loose, just like we did before. So I'm getting a big kind of oval egg shape of the belly, and we're going to measure how long and wide that is with our pencil. How long the bird is down towards his undertail coverts there. And just that big egg shape. And you can never measure too much. It really helps to stay accurate, to do lots of measuring. No erasing, just moving that pencil. Now we're going to do a triangle kind of his rump area and his tail. Just get that placed. And his tail is more to the right than you might think it would be if you were just drawing from memory or imagination. So that's why you always want to keep measuring, double checking your proportions, your relative proportions, looking at your angles, negative shapes. Now we're moving on to those really blurry wings that we're barely going to suggest. Oh, wait, sorry. So I decided to do a little bit of cleaning up. So this is where I'm going to clean up the main body. Like I said, I try to get an outline of the core of the body first before I start putting on any of the extremities like the wings or the tail or the legs. Okay, so now I did that first erasing, and now we're just going to show that line of the wings, just super subtle. It's not a completely straight line because they're going up a bit, but it's almost straight. Measuring the length of those wings. And this doesn't have to be exact because these are going to be super blurry. You can smudge them with a bunch of graphite and it won't matter. So we're just trying to get that triangle basically of the length and the width, not getting any detail in there. Okay, now we're going to look at the feet. They're very small. We're just going to place where they are first. So you saw I'm just making a mark of how far they are from the end of the bill. We're going to do that right foot first. And again, feet can be really problematic and very intimidating if you try to get all of the angles of the foot and the joints. There's a lot to learn with that. We're just going to suggest them, especially since they're kind of black and very blurry, because we're pretending this is a bird in flight. So it's not like it would be this crisp, like this beautiful photograph here. So I'm just basically getting an angle of the kind of the wrist and then the toes. And then I'll just suggest some little nails on the toes later. Okay, so we're going to stop with the feet. And again, since we got a little bit of the whole bird, and we're going to pretend maybe he flew away and then he flew back, we're going to have a few more minutes to look at him. And now we're going to get some more details and get the head more accurate and then work our way down, just like we did with the streamer tail. So I'm going a little bit more slowly like before, and a little bit firmer, so you'll see that line a bit more. That head, those head feathers, they really come into the bill almost like a teardrop shape. So it's not an abrupt change like you might see in like a bullfinch or something, or a parrot. It's a very gentle line going from the bill to the forehead. So you guys are hanging in there. Pretty much everybody's still here. You must be busy drawing. Okay, so now we're doing that forehead and the back of his head. And just going a little bit darker Double checking that length one more time. You know, and my proportions are pretty good because I've done this a lot. Yours might not be that exact, but that's why I keep measuring so that you'll keep measuring too. Then I'm going to look at that eye and I measure how far the eye is down from the top of the forehead. See that? So I'm just kind of placing that eye and I'm noticing how large it is. Remember, hummingbirds have a very large head and a large eye in proportion to their body compared to other families of birds. And just making that eye, it's not quite round. It's a little bit of an oval. But again, they could be blinking their eye, so it doesn't really matter what shape it is, just kind of a circle. And when you fill it in, leave a little bit of a highlight for the light of the sun. Although these highlights in these photographed birds might be brighter if they were using a flash. And then there's always this little line between the end of the bill and the eyes that kind of connects them, like a little roadway. And that's what that was. Now I'm going the back of the head and those beautiful iridescent feathers. We're going to add those in a minute, but I'm just outlining where the gorget is. That's those beautiful feathers of the neck that the male shows off. And look how long those are. You really don't want to draw them that long in your mind, but once you do that measurement and see how long they are, indeed, they're almost halfway down the belly of this beautiful male bee hummingbird. Those beautiful opera rose or kind of magenta colored gorget feathers. So we're going to add those later, but I was just trying to get the outline of those first. Getting his fat little cheek there. Then finishing up with the belly. We're going to finish up with the rest of the outline. Then we're going to go back to those gorget feathers. Keeping that wing real light because we're just going to put a bunch of graphite on there and smooth it out. That's his shoulder right there that I just drew. So that'll be a little darker. I'm just going to add some graphite there and just a suggestion of the individual wings. Now his rump and his tail. He's got a pretty short, kind of plain tail. And those undertail coverts there. We've got some little like half circles kind of there that are white. And then the tail feathers, we're just suggesting those again. This is not a scientific illustration or a field guide. So we're just making suggestions, especially if we're going to pretend that these guys are in flight. And a lot of this is a little bit blurry. Okay, now just giving a little bit more emphasis to the legs. His right leg is a little bit covered with feathers there. And so it's going to be smaller than his left leg. And I'm just adding just a little shadowing and a little bit of the nails. You might notice that 3 nails are kind of going back and 1 nail is going forward. Okay, Rebecca, see you later. And I'm just doing very subtle lines that just kind of show that there's 3 toes, but we're not dealing with anything else. So I'm just kind of smearing them there, pretending that they're moving. That makes it easy. When I was a kid, I used to love to draw horses because I didn't have a horse and I wanted one. And so I would always draw the horses, but I had such a hard time drawing the legs correctly. So I would always hide the legs and the hooves in really tall grass, like he was in a rich, lush pasture. Then I didn't have to draw the hooves. So same thing with this. You can just draw anything that you don't want to really draw or you feel like you can't draw. Just blur it out with a smearing of your graphite pencil. And then we'll just pretend like right there that he's just flying fast, which he is. We'd never see all these details in a real bird because he wouldn't be frozen like that, like in this photograph. So here's the fun part. Here's where we're going to look more at those gorget feathers that we didn't look at before. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the paper upside down. I don't know if you can do this, But the idea is that your hand generally likes to move in a certain direction. So it's kind of hard to do this. See me trying to do this right there, and I'm bending my hand in a weird direction. So whenever you can, turn your paper and your drawings to make your hand movements most ergonomic. So our hands mostly like to kind of go like this in an arc. They don't like to go upside down like this. So let's try that. Now you might not have this picture, but maybe you have the drawing that you're working on. And we're just going to try to draw some of those little half moon shapes starting at the base. And the feathers are always shortest towards the top of the bird, starting with the right next to the bill. They're very, very tiny, and they get larger and larger in a very particular pattern as they go up and over the forehead and down the neck. So just notice that pattern. We're not drawing every one exactly. We're just kind of noticing that idea and suggesting it. You're welcome. I'm glad you liked it, Yinamalia. All right, so you just see how I'm doing this. And these feathers are really fun as they get larger. These little, they kind of look like a scallop shell. So if you've been to the beach, maybe if you live in the Caribbean and you've been to the beach and seen scallops, you can think of that with these individual feathers, because each feather has like these little scallop lines on it that you might not see right now, but if you look more closely at the playback later, you could see it better. So I'm drawing these little parallel lines right now. See that? Those are little parallel lines on each feather, just suggesting that that's scalloping, just like you see in a scallop shell on the beach. Now I'm going to work under his chin and noticing the same idea of the feathers start out really small right next to the bill, and they get progressively larger and larger as they go down the neck. And I'm not drawing every one exactly. That would take a really long time. So I am just kind of basing it on the pattern that seems to be suggesting itself, which is these lines of feathers that kind of overlap like shingles on a roof. If you have that, if you've seen that kind of house. So these just C-shaped patterns where each feather is getting a little bit larger. Again, I'm not trying to be exact. And they get really large, and those last two are really long. In fact, I probably could have drawn them even longer. And now I'm just going along the edge of the front of his neck there. Oh yeah, then under his neck and getting that those parallel rows of feathers again. Not exact, just suggesting, because we're pretending this would be more of a field sketch, right? This isn't a scientific illustration. Now, I'm going to suggest those parallel lines that you can see on each feather. Not going to draw them all, just suggest the ones that we might see more in detail in the sun. And again, think of a scallop shell on the seashore. It's the same idea of these parallel lines and these ridges. Blake, you're welcome. Okay, so now we're going to turn it right side up and see what we think. We're almost done. Sometimes I have my students do an entire drawing upside down because it really helps them to shift into their right brain. Now I'm just adding a little bit more, just looking one more time as we finish up, adding a little bit darkness to the eye. There wasn't that much of a highlight. Just kind of looking everywhere again, what I want to do. Oh, I'm glad your Streamertail came out good. Ruchi, how do you pronounce your name? Okay, so now I'm just, I'm lightening that feather because, again, that leading edge of that wing is just really blurry. So I'm just going to put a bunch of graphite down really fast and loose And then I'm going to smear it with my finger. And that's just going to make it look blurred. And then you could work a lot longer on all of these. Of course, these are just suggestions. These are just ideas to get you started with the idea of the way I draw. And I'm just kind of suggesting some of those beautiful teal blue feathers. And of course, feel free to add colors later. And I think Lisa suggested that you might add your picture someplace. I don't know if Lisa, if you're still there, if people could add their sketches someplace to the Facebook page or send them someplace. I'm not sure. Lisa, do you have a place you want people to go to? So I'm going to link here now. Copy. Just going to make a couple more links. So I put a link into my website where you can get these resources. That's the same link that you see below the picture. This is click here for resources. And then I'm also giving you the link one more time to the BirdsCaribbean website and the series called From the Nest that has all of these endemic birds and the coloring pages, one every day. And one more link to the page on their website that talks about the new coloring book that just came out, and I was the illustrator for it. That's one of the reasons I'm the one doing this presentation today. And I think that's all the links. Okay, Lisa says, use the hashtag CEBF from the nest. And I guess you could use that on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, on your own website or anywhere. So I'd really love to see those sketches. Okay, so we just went 18 minutes over. I got so tall here. We just went 18 minutes over. I hope you had a lot of fun. It looks like a lot of you stayed on to the very end. Again, if you're not done yet, go back and watch the replay. It'll be ready in just a few moments, and you can pause it at any time, or I think you can even play it more slowly if you need to watch me draw more slowly. And of course, look at my website for more resources, more coloring pages and stuff. Okay. Oh, look at Lisa's sketch. There's Lisa's sketch. So you want to
proud of myself.
Words, Lisa.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, Christine. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. That was awesome. That was so great. So we will share this webinar recording on our website and our YouTube, and it'll be available also on Facebook. So if you joined later, if you want to watch again, we'll share the link with all of you. And thank you so much for joining. And if you have ideas for other birds to draw to bring Christine back for another webinar, maybe in the next couple weeks or few weeks, let us know, and we'll see if we can make it happen. Yeah, look for us on Facebook. Just look for BirdsCaribbean or Caribbean Birds, and you should be able to find us. On Instagram, look for @BirdsCaribbean. We're doing fun stories every day. So glad you could join, Natalia, and do take a picture of your drawing and share it and tag us @BirdsCaribbean and use the hashtag.
Yeah, I would really love to see all your sketches. I'm sorry we didn't get to all 4 of them, but that's your homework. I want you to try to use those same techniques, especially the ones I talked about in my 6 steps here that you can find on my website. And I would love to see you try the other species, which were the purple-throated Carib and the Antillean crested hummingbird. Good. Okay. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up.
So thanks again, everybody. And please do follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Look for BirdsCaribbean, all one word. And we look forward to chatting with you again in the future. Stay safe, everybody.